Welcome back for another Music Theory Bite. In this video, we're going to be talking about this chord right here. It's called an augmented sixth chord. If that's something you'd like to learn more about, then this is the video for you. Augmented sixth chords are very interesting chords. They're non-linear chords. That is, ordinarily we create a chord by giving you a chord root and you stack major thirds and minor thirds on top of it. Augmented sixth chords are a little bit different in that they arguably don't have a root. And if we were to try to stack the thing in thirds, we'd end up with a diminished third in there. So they actually come about through a different type of process we call linear motion. Augmented sixth chords are kind of fun chords because of that. That is, there's so many things that you can do with them. So if you're ready, let's start learning about the augmented sixth chord. Let's start by talking about what goes into an augmented sixth chord. What's the theory you need to know before you start to deal with these things? Well, first, the most important thing is we need to know its function, and augmented sixth chords carry predominant function. That is, you can insert them in a chord progression wherever you would put a different predominant chord, such as a supratonic 2 chord or a subdominant 4 chord. These are chromatic chords, so they're going to have a lot more intensity to them than the diatonic 2 or 4 chord, and that's one of the things that makes them so interesting. We can think of these chords as being native to the minor mode, and we'll see how that works in just a minute. When we spell them, we're going to be using mostly scale degrees that show up in the minor mode. So when these things show up in the major mode, we need to think of them as being borrowed or a form of mode mixture from the minor mode. Augmented sixth chords are constructed using scale degree lowered 6, that is the natural 6th scale degree, in the bass, and then sharp 4 in another voice. It doesn't matter what other voice it is. And you'll notice the interval formed between the lowered 6th scale degree and the raised 4th scale degree is an augmented sixth. That's how these chords got their name. Now, augmented sixth chords typically come in 3 flavors. Some people call these the nationality chords because of it. Don't get too hung up on these names because they actually have very little to do with where these chords come from. But the most typical augmented sixth chords are the Italian, the French, and the German. They all share that lowered 6th scale degree and the sharp 4th scale degree, but they have other scale degrees that are thrown in there in order to make the sound more resonant or more interesting. In fact, there are literally dozens of different types of augmented sixth chords because once you get that augmented sixth, flat 6 to sharp 4, you can stick in lots of other scale degree combinations to come up with interesting sounds. Let's start by spelling augmented sixth chords. Doesn't matter what flavor we're doing, whether it's Italian, French, or German, the first 3 steps are exactly the same. So the first thing we want to do is we're going to write the lowered 6th scale degree. That's the natural 6th scale degree in the minor mode, and that almost always shows up in the bass. In fact, we're just always going to put it in the bass. Later on, we'll get a little bit more fancy with them. So today we're going to be in the key of G minor. So our 6th scale degree in the key of G minor is an E flat, so I'm going to put that in the bass. Step 2, we need to put the augmented sixth into the chord. That is our sharp 4th scale degree. So key of G minor, 4th scale degree is C natural. I want to raise that to make it a sharp 4, so it's going to be a C sharp. Now it doesn't matter what voice we put it in. I'll put it in the alto voice, give them a little bit of fun in this particular one. We can put it in any of the voices as long as we're observing the rules of good voice distribution. Step 3. All of the basic augmented sixth chords, Italian, French, and German, also have scale degree 1 in them. So we're going to find a place to put scale degree 1. In this case, we're going to put it in the tenor. So these 3 tones are common to all 3 of the nationality augmented sixth chords, Italian, French, and German. That means step 4, we have to put in the tone that distinguishes them from one another. The nationality tone is what I'm going to call them. So if we're writing an Italian augmented sixth, we're going to start with another scale degree 1. We're just going to double that scale degree 1. And I've saved the soprano voice for that nationality tone in this voicing. Keep in mind, scale degree flat 6 stays in the bass. All the other voices can be distributed in any way that you want. Now, if I wanted to make it a French augmented sixth, I would insert a scale degree 2 instead of a scale degree 1. And that sounds like this. And finally, the German augmented sixth uses that 3rd scale degree, the 3rd scale degree that's native to the minor mode, remember. And that sounds like this. So all of our augmented sixth chords are spelled with flat 6 in the bass, sharp 4 in another voice, creating the augmented sixth, scale degree 1, and then we have the nationality tone, either another scale degree 1, a scale degree 2, or a scale degree 3. Remember, we're native to the minor mode, so it's going to be that lowered scale degree that we typically find in the minor mode. Now that we know how to write these things, we also need to be able to resolve them. Augmented sixth chords typically resolve to one of three places. They either go straight to a dominant triad, so I could take my Italian augmented sixth and go to a dominant triad, or they can go to a dominant seventh chord. Not a whole lot of difference with that. Which then of course resolves out to a tonic, or just as likely they might even go to a cadential 6/4 chord, which sounds a little bit like this. Now the important thing to remember about these things, they're altered predominants. They're predominants with chromaticism in them. And all these altered predominants work because they enhance the motion towards the goal tone. And the goal tone in this case is the fifth scale degree. That is, they have a half step above the goal tone, the fifth scale degree, in the bass, that's my flat 6. And they have a half step below the goal tone, the fifth scale degree, and that is that sharp 4. That's that augmented sixth. And those two voices are going to move away from each other, the flat 6 going down, the sharp 4 going up, to get to the dominant tone. And then the other tones are just coloring tones that help to make the sound a little bit more full and a little bit more interesting. So when we have to resolve these things, we can do this using steps. The first step is resolve flat 6 down to 5. Step 2, resolve sharp 4 up to 5. Now, the only exception to that is if we go straight to a dominant 7th chord, in which case that sharp 4 will move down to the natural 4, which is the 7th of the dominant 7th chord. And then, of course, if we go to the 1/6/4, that sharp 4 can go up to 5. Next, we're going to resolve scale degree 1, and that typically will step down to the leading tone unless we're going to a 1/6/4, in which case it will stay right where it is because we don't need to move it anywhere, and then that scale degree 1 will slide down when the 1/6/4 resolves. So, flat 6 goes down to 5, sharp 4 goes up to 5, unless you're going to a 5/7, in which case it goes down to natural scale degree 4, and then scale degree 1 goes down to the leading tone. Step 4. Let's resolve the national tone. So if we're dealing with an Italian augmented 6, we've got a doubled scale degree 1. And that doubled scale degree 1, since we already have one moving down to the leading tone, this one's going to have to move opposite direction in order to not create unwanted parallels. So in this case, we're going to have our Italian augmented 6, and I'll put my national tone in the soprano. Everything's going to resolve the way that it should. Flat 6 down to 5, sharp 4 up to 5, 1 in the tenor down to 7, and that means that this one in the soprano, my extra tone, is going to now move up to scale degree 2. So the Italian augmented 6th resolution sounds like this. That's if it's going straight to a dominant. Of course, if it's going to a dominant 7th, the only thing that changes is my sharp 4 moves down by half step to natural 4. And if it goes to a 1/6/4, my double tone will generally leap up to scale degree 3, which will then resolve out to If we're dealing with a French augmented sixth, everything of course works the same way. Flat 6 down to 5, sharp 4 up to 5, scale degree 1 down to scale degree 7, and scale degree 2. Well, it's already a part of the dominant chord, so it can just stay right where it is. Now, if it's going to a dominant 7th chord, it'll stay where it is, but if it's going to a 1-6-4 chord, all it has to do is step up to the 3rd scale degree. And finally, our German augmented sixth. Now, if we do everything the same way that we've done before, we have our flat 6, our 1, our sharp 4, and our 3, and we go straight to our dominant, it's going to sound like this. And you might have noticed that the flat 6 and the flat 3 both resolving down to scale degree 2 creates parallel fifths, and that's something we usually try to avoid. So when you write a German augmented sixth, in most cases, that is going to resolve straight to a cadential 6-4 chord, a 1-6-4 chord. It very rarely resolves to a dominant or a dominant 7th chord. In fact, you can, at this point, just memorize German augmented sixth, take it to a 1-6-4, not straight to a dominant. Now, there is a special circumstance that happens with the German augmented sixth. That is, if we are going to resolve it to major, everything is still going to be resolving the same way. Flat 6, sharp 4, flat 3, and 1 is going to go to a 1-6-4 chord, but in this case, since we're in major, our 1-6-4 is a major 1-6-4. So notice that the B flat resolves up to a B natural. Now that's something that music theorists don't generally like. We don't like cross relations, that is having two notes with different accidentals on consecutive chords. So typically what we'll do in that case is we will respell that B flat as an A sharp to reflect the voice leading. It steps up from A sharp to B natural. It's a little bit of a semantic difference since A sharp and B flat are enharmonically equivalent, but since this is about craftsmanship, we want to make sure we do it the right way. Well, that does it for this video. If you found it helpful, make sure you like it. Feel free to leave constructive comments below, and as always, make sure you subscribe to my channel for the latest music theory bites as they become available. Until next time.